Chapter 22. The story of the twins of Nayenezgani has been told from father to son for generations. The center of the story concerns the monster's power. A monster must show its true power before its defeat can be honored in a story. Killing a field mouse is easy. Killing a cougar is hard. Killing this monster, this creature, is almost impossible. That is the task of the monster slayer, doing the impossible. This monster has destroyed an entire army base full of people and killed dozens more. But it has not yet shown its true power. I fear that when my brother understands this, he will turn away. The monster slayer must remain forever strong. My brother has never been good at doing anything for long periods of time, especially things that are difficult. It didn't take long for the troop to get organized. Nakai was amazed at how efficiently the colonel's units ran. Within 10 minutes of receiving the order, Major Lee and Corporal Nakai led the 26 men out into the desert, leaving the buildings and lights of Agate behind. Nakai was relieved to get out of there. He needed to go after this monster. He felt that every second wasted was another second that gave the creature an advantage. He felt it had enough advantages already. The colonel rode in one of two vehicles to the rear of the group. The Humvees were going to have rough going at times, and the colonel had given orders for Nakai and Major Lee not to worry about the vehicles keeping up. They would find a way. Major Lee had agreed, but had asked respectfully that the colonel have 2 soldiers in each Humvee, plus the drivers. The colonel agreed. That left 19 men on foot. The first destinations were the bodies. They weren't that far apart. Nakai stopped long enough at each to note if there were any differences from the previous kills, and to allow Major Lee to dispatch 2 of the men to move the bodies back to town. At Cheney's body, Nakai learned nothing new. The creature had acted just as Nakai had thought it would act. A quick kill and a rapid beheading. It was Mayhew that made him stop. The use of the M16 bothered him. Lee saw the weapon's use as a message. Nakai agreed with that. But weapons were particular things. Each culture had traditions and ways of using them. This creature had picked up the gun and used it within minutes. Nakai had seen the creature's weapon fire and knew he could no longer use it. But the creature had figured out the army's weapon of choice. Either the creature was a quick study, or it was already familiar with the weapon when it came to New Mexico. Nakai wagered the creature was already familiar with it. There were a lot of things Nakai hadn't said to the colonel, things that weren't really relevant to their pursuit of this creature. But it bothered him that the creature had known where to come. This desert, complete with the army base, was like a game preserve. There were humans here, protected, yes, but within structured limits. There was also a perfect place to make camp. Nakai suspected that this creature hadn't happened upon this place. He suspected the creature had come here purposefully. All Nakai could do at this time was thank every god he could think of that the creature seemed to have come alone. Now, as the unit strode into the desert, their force was down to 17 soldiers on foot and 6 in the 2 Humvees, plus the colonel. Nakai only hoped they couldn't catch up with the creature before the commandos were in position. He doubted they would. The creature that they attacked in Agate also didn't use its invisibility power, as it had when Deedle was killed. Nakai would bet almost anything that the power was contained in a part of its armor left in its camp, in the lava rocks. The creature's tracks were easy to follow, even in the desert night. It was making no attempt to cover its trail, but simply striding at a steady pace directly north, towards the lava fields. Major Lee ordered all the men to use their night goggles, but Nakai ignored the order. He had lived in the nights of this desert his entire life. The sky was clear, the stars out. To him, the desert was as clear as daylight. Nakai glanced around. Tilden also had his night goggles on his head, unused. Nakai nodded to him, and Tilden nodded back. They both felt they carried the responsibility of getting this troop through the desert. This was their desert, their backyard. They knew it and loved it. It was the way of both of their peoples. Nakai turned towards the desert and set a fast pace, walking beside the creature's tracks, striding as fast as he safely could through the desert brush and rocks. Tilden paced him to his right, staying just behind, but moving as surely as Nakai. From what Nakai could tell, the creature had approximately a 20-minute head start on them, and judging from the length of its stride, it would be able to move faster than they could. But even at its fastest pace, the creature wouldn't reach the lava fields before the commandos were in place. It bothered him that the monster made no attempt to hide its tracks. Another signal? Or a trap? Nakai wanted to be prepared for both. Around and behind him, the 17 soldiers on foot sounded more like a buffalo stampede than a night search. At the pace Nakai was setting, there was no way anyone but a trained scout could move through this desert brush at night without making a noise. Nakai could, and Tilden could. But the other 15 soldiers, in full gear, followed by 2 Humvees scattering rock and crashing through brush, could more than likely be heard for miles. A clear rumble echoing under the stars like an unseen thunderstorm in a far distant mountain range. That was exactly what Nakai wanted. He wanted that creature to know they were right behind it. With luck, it would be paying more attention to them than to its path ahead, and the commandos would have open shots. Now Nakai only needed to make sure the creature didn't stop, and take them on first. After 5 minutes, when it became evident that the creature wasn't altering its path, Nakai slowed for a moment, just long enough to let Major Lee catch up with him. "Sir," Nakai said, "I think I need to move out ahead, with only one man 30 meters behind me, and another 30 behind him. I would like the main group to remain 30 behind the last man." "In case the creature sets a trap," Lee said. "Yes," Nakai said. Lee nodded. "Do it." "But Private Tilden behind me," Nakai said. "He's Zuni, and used to this desert." Again Major Lee nodded. Then he stopped and held up his hand for all the men to stop. Nakai just kept moving ahead without breaking stride. Behind him, he heard the Major say, "Tilden, follow Corporal Nakai. Make sure you stay 30 meters behind him and ready." "Yes, sir," Tilden said. After 30 paces, Nakai glanced around. In the darkness, he could see Tilden step out after him. He couldn't hear him. Tilden was just as silent as Nakai expected him to be. Nakai nodded, then returned his attention to the task at hand. Following the creature's trail in the dark desert and making sure the creature wasn't stopped ahead, waiting to ambush them. 10 more minutes and the commandos would be in position ahead, flanked along the edge of the lava field, hiding, waiting for the creature to be driven right into them. This plan was so simple. If only it worked. Behind him, the entire troop started up again, filling the desert quiet with the sound of cracking brush, rattling rock, and engines. Nakai smiled to himself. It was a good sound, a comforting sound. For the first time in a long while, he was glad he wasn't in the desert alone.